Thanks, Richard. Welcome, everybody. Today's talk, building and deploying PHP applications with Phing. Not Phing, but Phing. I'm Michael. The Dutch version is Michiel, which is probably very hard to pronounce for you. I've only met 2 cultures in the world as of now, anyway, that can pronounce my name right, and that's Belgians, Dutch, well, and some Israelis, maybe. Welcome again. I'm a freelance PHP and Java contractor. I've been doing PHP since 99, 98, maybe even. So it's been a while. I'm the project lead on Phing right now. If you want to talk to me later, hit me up on Twitter or LinkedIn. Below you can see some of the things I like to do in the preciously little spare time that remain after doing all the work I have. I won't go into detail, ask me later if you want to know about it. All right, this talk, I will tell you why you should use a building tool. Then I will tell you what Phing is and how you can use it. There will be a couple of examples, possibly a live demo if time allows. And at the end, I will tell you how to extend Phing to use it for your own purposes. Right, why use a build tool? We are PHP developers, right? We script for the web, we don't compile. Wrong. We do a lot of repetitive tasks in PHP. Okay, we don't compile, but we still make packages. We upload. We do things like unit testing. We might even minify JS or CSS. Repetition. What is the problem with repetition? We are human. We are lazy by trade. I mean, a good developer is a lazy developer. We get bored easily, and when we get bored or tired, we make mistakes, we forget things. If we do things manually, things will go wrong eventually. As I've said, a lot of repetitive tasks, version control, testing, configuring, packaging, you name it. This is all very boring. These are things you probably are doing daily or weekly at least when you are deploying projects. These are things you want to automate. Why do you want to automate? This is not only for developers, it's also for testers, for administrators, for well, pretty much everybody on your team that's doing anything repetitive. It's an easier handover to new team members, especially if you have a junior on your team that is not comfortable with all the tasks that you need to do to deploy or to build one of your apps. You as a senior or one of the seniors in your company might not be comfortable giving that task to the new junior, which means that he gets less time off and has to be around at weird hours to deploy. You might want to hand that task to a junior. If you have automated tools, automated scripts, there's a lot less, to explain, and a lot less that can go wrong. It also improves the quality. You do things repeatedly. It will happen the same every day. It saves time, and it reduces technical debt. It's a buzzword that's been going around for a while now, especially today. Technical debt. Every time you introduce something into your workflow, you need to be able to maintain it. If you consolidate all your scripts, all your manual steps into one automatic step, you reduce that maintenance. Right, moving on to Phing. What is Phing? This is James Bond Island near Thailand. It's called Khao Phing Nek, something like that. Phing is not GNU Make. It's one of these wonderfully recursive acronyms. It's a project build system. It's based on Apache Ant. Who knows Ant? A few. Who knows Phing, by the way? And who uses Phing? Okay, sizable. This was originally developed back in the PHP 4 days by a company called Binary Cloud. It was ported in early 2003 to PHP 5. And my first commit was in '04, and I started maintaining the project full-time in '09. What can Phing do? Phing is it's a scripting tool, basically. And the scripting language is XML, which makes it very easy to understand. It's human readable. It's mostly cross-platform. Why mostly? We have some parts of Phing that run specifically on Windows. We have some parts that run specifically on Linux or derivatives. Most of the tasks, most of the parts of Phing run on all platforms that you use to develop. It has minimal required dependencies. It has a lot of optional dependencies because it's an interface to a lot of popular PHP tools that are out there right now. I've heard someone call it good glue. This is, in a nutshell, what Phing can do, and this is not even the complete overview as of today. Right here we have file transfer, simple things like secure copy, FTP. We can do shell commands, either locally or remotely. Unit testing, I'm sure most of you know PHPUnit. We also provide access to simple test. Of course, there's Xdebug. Reporting, we have PHP Documenter and PHP Depend. We also interface with the new Hype doc blocks. Packaging, we have FAR, PHK, zip, tar, pretty much everything. XML tasks, a lot of file system tasks. Of course, versioning, everything you can do with SVN and Git, you can do from Phing itself. A lot of JavaScript stuff, code sniffers, and some source code protection. I'm not sure how many of you use IronCube or ZenGuard to encode. Not a lot. Well, it can do that too. And some database tasks to, for instance, migrate your database, to upgrade your database, do database deployment. Some people ask me, why should I use Phing? I mean, Ant's there, and Ant is more mature. At least that's what they say. And it can do everything that Phing can do. True. I like healthy competition, being competitive is very healthy. So I'm not saying you should use Phing, but I'm going to give you a nice set of reasons why you should anyway. It has a rich set of tasks. Ant is a Java tool, so it's the tasks that Ant provides are Java related. We are in the PHP world, so that Phing is focused on PHP. It integrates with a lot of our specific tools that we use: PHP Depend, Code Sniffer, PHPUnit. More importantly, it allows you to stay within the PHP core, within the infrastructure, if you will. Especially for junior developers who might not be comfortable with Java or any other language, for that matter. You might want to keep them in the PHP world to, ease them into it. It is also easy to extend because PHP requires no compiling. You can easily extend Phing. You can even embed PHP code directly into your build file. And in the end, the decision is, of course, yours. There are more alternatives than only Phing or Ant. Right, going on to the basics. To install Phing, we use Pair. Who here does not know about Pair? Very good. It's very simple. We have our own channel, so you can just install it. The documentation, which is very extensive, I might add, is an optional package. Right, I've mentioned before that Phing uses XML build files. They consist of three basic elements. The most important element is the task, which is basically code that performs something like a make dir, or calls PHPUnit, or calls PHP code sniffer. So it's the most basic element within the build file. To group those tasks together, we have what is called a target, which can optionally depend on other targets. So in that way, you can create a chain of targets. And then there's the root node in the XML file, which is the project. How does that look? I mentioned the project, the root node. We call this one example with a default target of world. We have two targets, one named hello and one named world. Target world depends on hello. And both targets do a very simple echo test. Well, the end result, and I hope you can all see this, or sort of see this. The end result is that the hello task is called first because world, which is the default task, or target, sorry, depends on hello. So that way you can say you have a build target, you can make that depend on a target that syntax checks your files and then packages it and then tests it, etc. Phing supports something which is very powerful, properties, which are basically, well, they are similar to ini files. So they're just simple key value files, which can be loaded with the property task right here. And they can be expanded in the build file, everywhere in the build file, by using $key. Moving on to file sets. File sets are well, pretty much unique concept to end Phing. File sets allow you to group files that you want to process. Most tasks support it, such as copy and FTP, but even PHPUnit. With file set you can use, or you can define a number of regular expressions, or sort of regular expressions, to define which files you want to include in that particular file set and which files you want to exclude. So in this sense, you build a file tree of the files that you want to process in whatever task you are calling. In this case, we include every PHP file, star.php, in every directory and subdirectory in the directory application. So we dive very deep and include every PHP file. However, we exclude everything that contains test. By the way, if you have any questions during the talk, raise your hand, no problem. File sets can be referenced in the build file. That means that you can define a file set once in the build file and then use it and reuse it and reuse it again. File sets also allow you to add selectors, where you can say, okay, I need files that are younger than a year, or contain this file name, or contain this specific line of text, etc. During operations that move or create files, such as the copy task, we can also use mappers to change the file name before you copy it. Say you want to rename every .txt file to .something else, you can use a mapper for that. You can also, during the copy, use filters to strip comments or white space, do translation, replace other values from a property file. This example shows that in a little bit more detail. Here we have a mapper. We use this in the task copy. We glob every .txt file to .new.txt. And then we filter chain. We chain a number of filters. In this case, it's only the replace regex filter. Try saying that 3 times after. Which replaces the Windows .0f with just the /n. Oh, and by the way, then it expands all the properties in the file that is found. Expand properties will basically scan the file that you are copying for any mention of properties that are loaded. So that way you can, for example, include a version of your latest build in some file. I'm moving on to a few examples now. First, we will start with version control, then some unit testing, PHPUnit, packaging, and then something about deployment. There will be a couple of specific examples about deployment. It will not be a very extensive deployment thing because deployment is so specific to your situation Not everybody deploys to the same servers. Some people deploy to Amazon. So there are a lot of different scenarios that you could think of. I've chosen a simple scenario. You have a question?
Yes. Would Phing ever support JSON? PHP has a good support for JSON for build. Will Phing support JSON instead of XML?
As to define the build file, you mean? Not sure. There's no real need right now. And then on to a database migration, interesting part, and continuous integration. Starting with version control. As I mentioned before, we support CVS. Not sure if anyone uses that, but we do support it. We support SVN and Git. For the purposes of this slide, I've just chosen SVN. Git is pretty much the same. The upper one is we are going to copy. Well, most of you know SVN, I think. Who doesn't know SVN? This task copies one of the, well, it copies a repository or a URL to a tag. The next example is an export of the same repository URL to a local directory. Most people that use Phing to automatically build, they want it to check out from, well, they want it to be started whenever you have a change in your repository, so you want to check it out. This you can do with SVN export. The last one is very interesting. Last revision of a particular repository URL. And this is passed into a property, which you can then store in a TXT file or somewhere else, HTML. Moving on to PHPUnit. We have built-in support for most, and I want to say most, because nothing changes as fast as PHPUnit. So we support most configuration options. It gathers code coverage information and does some reporting. It reports in the JUnit format, so it's a little bit different than the reporting that PHPUnit does by itself. PHPUnit is called this in this manner. We run PHPUnit here with halt on failure and halt on error true. What that means is that when PHPUnit encounters one failing test or a test with an error in, we fail the build as a whole. You can also set them to false, and Phing will happily trundle along and run all your tests, so you can do some reporting or whatever. In this case, we wanted to cancel the build. Question?
Hello there. Last few weeks I've spent trawling through Phing
Yeah.
and creating some quite creative scenarios. One thing I did notice is, because we updated wallboard when there's various things going on using Chrome. I was just wondering if there's like a hook for when there's like a failure, so we can call the wallboard, because I couldn't see that at present.
So the question was, if I understand correctly, is there a hook for when the build fails?
Yes.
Not yet, but it is something that is on the roadmap.
Right, yeah.
Because there have been more people that were asking for that, and it's something, we're thinking something along the lines of a try-catch scenario. Back to the example. Bootstrap is just a general PHP file which is included before all the tests are run, where you can do some configuration setup for your test, and we print the summary. Button. We include a simple file set, as I mentioned before. The end result is right here. There's only one test, and it is failing, and then the build as a whole fails. And the nice thing about Phing is that the exit level or the run level of Phing itself will be larger than 0. So if you were to run Phing in, say, Jenkins will fail because Phing failed. As I mentioned before, you can do code coverage gathering and reporting. Before you do that, we set up the database, which is basically the files that you want to include code coverage for. You don't want to cover anything outside your project, such as pair classes that you include, or even your tests. You don't want to include those in your coverage reports. We call PHPUnit with page coverage is true. And note that in this case, halt on error, halt on failure are not present. The default is false. So it means that if a test fails or errors, we will continue anyway, and it will just show up in the report. We then generate those reports. We generate the JUnit style report and a Clover style report. I will give you an example of this later, complete demo. Documentation. Phing currently integrates with a number of popular documentation tools. APIGen is one of the latest. This is not released yet, but this is in our GitHub trunk right now. We also support restructured text. Not sure if anyone uses that. No. And we also support docblocks, of course. Docblocks is pretty much identical to PHP Documenter in the way it is called. We just give it a number of files in our file set a title for the documentation, an output directory, and whether we want it to make noise or not. The end result is, well, docblocks, as you probably know it. Moving on to packaging, which is an interesting part of building your file or your files. Most of you will deploy an app to a server somewhere, but in the case of Phing, which actually builds itself, we provide a package online. So that's either a tar or a zip file or a FAR package even, which we are working on. Tar is the format of choice for pair packages. And pair packages have an additional thing in them, which is a manifest or a package.xml. That's something you can generate with this task, the pair package. There are a number of options and a number of elements, in this case, the maintainers for the package. We generate that and we end up with a package.xml, which we can include in the tar. In the tar file, we can generate like this. It's pretty simple. We include either a base dir, and which will take all the files in the directory, or we include a file set. We can also do a zip, which is pretty much the same thing. Packaging FARs, somewhat new. We are working on packaging Phing itself as a FAR. Who doesn't know about FAR? FAR it is similar to the Java jar, which is sort of a zip file which can execute. So you can, instead of unzipping your tar or your zip to a directory and just ending up with all the files and everything, you download a FAR and you run php something something.far. PHP will run that FAR as if it were one logical block, which this is very useful in terms of versioning, because if you deploy a new version or release a new version, you just release a new FAR instead of a number of files. FAR is in terms of the metadata, which is in there. It's pretty similar to pair packages. We include the authors, a version, and we can optionally include a stub file. And the stub file is executed the moment you start PHP on that FAR file. So that can start Phing, for example, if you were to package Phing as a FAR. Moving on to deployments, which is where it's getting interesting. How many of you still deploy using FTP? Wow. Okay, a couple hands.
Fun, just for fun.
Just for fun, okay. Very good.
Yes, you can.
Well, I'm still going to show it anyway, because there are a lot of people that still deploy with FTP. I myself, if I do that, I only deploy SCP. If I deploy file by file. SCP is pretty similar to what you would think. You'd pass a username and a password, or a public key and a private key, a host name, destination directory, and a file set. Again, with FTP deploy, it's pretty much the same thing. Similar to Capistrano, you can also deploy using symlinks. Say that you deploy version 1.0 of your app, and you want to deploy version 1.1. You can copy over all your files, of course, but if you were to remove in version 1.1, one of your files would be removed, and it would still be there. So you want a fresh copy, and you want to point that app to the new file, to the new location, which is where we use symlinks. We first export the code from the SVN repository to a specific directory. The directory name is based on the last revision of that repository. We then symlink that new target to, well, the base tier of our app. We can also do this on a remote server with the task SSH. In that case, we just run the command ln-s on that directory. It also allows for easy code rollbacks, because if your version 1.1 were not to work, you can just change the symlink back to 1.0, and the damage limitation. If you have multiple servers, multiple targets, say staging, testing, production, one way to treat that is to use the input task, which basically prompts you to enter a string. We have, in this case, we have 3 valid arguments: testing, staging, production. And the inputted value, we put in the property env. Then we load the property file, which is, we expand the env property and we load that property file. So say you have testing and staging, and you have 2 property files for testing and staging. Those property files can contain, for example, database links, authors, and login codes, you name it. And those parameters will vary from environment to environment. This way you can use the same build file to deploy to multiple environments. The next topic is database migration, which is an interesting and tricky part of any deployment. This is not the end-all be-all, unfortunately. Phing has 2 ways of handling database migration right now. DB deploy is the one that's been in there the longest, and we are currently integrating Liquibase, which is pretty similar, but allows for a little easier rollback. DB deploy, what I want to show you in this case, uses a set of delta files, which are basically SQL scripts containing a do and a undo part. So the do and the rollback, or up and down, in which it's called in some cases. It tracks the current version of your database in an extra table that you include in your database, which is the changelog table with this structure. The delta scripts look like this. The first part of the SQL file is the up part, or the do, and the next part of the script is the undo. The idea behind is that every step you do, you reverse in the undo part, so a developer can either move up in the changelog line or move back, roll back. Of course, this is only structure. It is not data, which is something that is incredibly hard to manage. Data migration is a lot harder than database structure migration. We're keeping it to structure migration in this context. We then run the DB deploy task. In this case, we run it on a simple SQLite URL. You can also run it against Postgres or MySQL or Oracle. We pass it the directory that contains our Delta script. And we pass it two parameters, an output file and a undo output file. The output file will contain all the statements that are necessary to get your database up to the latest version, and the undo, again, to reverse it to the current situation. We then execute the deploy SQL, and the changes will be applied to our database.
It's possible to use variables in this case?
No. No. We are thinking about doing PHP snippets instead of just SQL, but we're not really sure about that yet. This is what it looks like. This is what the deploy file looks like after one version, or after we are one version behind. The first part is it will insert into our changelog table the number of the change, which is 1, because we have only one Delta file, and its number is 1. The Delta set, well, there's only one set of deltas. It is applied right now by dbdeploy, and this is the original file name of the Delta file. And then we see the snippet from our Delta file, which is creating the post table. And then at the end, when this is completed successfully, we update the changelog and said it's completed. The other way around, we just delete the post and then delete that entry from the changelog, and we're back to where we were. Moving on to Phing and Jenkins. Who here knows about Jenkins? Jenkins is, and it's going to be, well, I'm going to be a bit contradictory here. Jenkins is a Java app, but there is no real PHP alternative right now. So, Jenkins is a continuous integration app, which basically means that it allows you to either periodically or after a commit or manually even, to build your app and to verify and test that build, and in some cases deploy the results. And this will happen automatically. So instead of you having to run your build every time, it will just, well, it will monitor your SVN or your Git repository and start a build, say 5 minutes after your last commit. Build it, report on any failures, say you made an error and now your test suite fails. It will mail you, or you can even hook lights to it, red lights, green lights. So you have a very good idea of how your change is doing, how your build is doing. Jenkins comes with a Phing plugin, which basically allows you to call Phing without any problems. In this case, I've added one target. I hope you can all see the slide. Right? A Phing demo job. In the Phing demo job, I've added some extra elements. It does it performs check style, which is the PHP code sniffer. It performs code coverage, and it performs testing. Well, there are no tests. This is all run from one single PHP or Phing build file. And this is what you see in the console output. Basically, it just starts Phing with your build file. You see Phing running. Build is finished. Then Jenkins does some cleanup, and your build is done. Time for some demonstration. Right. This is Jenkins. This is the configure part of my job. I've set it to none. It does not control any version control right now, and it does not periodically or poll build, but it invokes Phing right here. I only invoke one target. I can, of course, invoke more targets, and I can even specify a specific Phing build file and any additional properties that I might have. Now I'll show you the actual build file. This is somewhat of a, well, it's a little more complex, this build file. There are a number of targets. The first one is clean, which basically deletes the report directory and then creates it again. The next one is lint, which does a syntax check on all the source files that I have defined right here. Linting is something that's very easy. It does catch a lot of errors. I mean, because PHP does not compile, sometimes you don't know about a syntax error until your client calls you Friday night. So this can be a lifesaver. The following target is test, which is very similar to what I just showed you on the slide. It calls PHPUnit. It does halt when there's a failure, and it produces a number of reports. Then we have a target which calls PHP code sniffer. Code sniffer is basically a check style-like tool which scans your PHP code for any violations of coding standards. Say you are using tabs instead of spaces, you are using curly braces at the wrong place, etc. The final target is build, which first depends on the previous targets to make sure they get executed, and then it will include the results in a zip file. And once again, this is what you see. I'll also do a number of other demos. For example, the PHPUnit. This is what happens when a build fails. It has some extra coloring, bright red, to let you know something went wrong. And I'm pretty sure I have a target which does not fail. This is the report target. And let me show you the actual report. This is what the report looks like. We have one test. It has failed. It is located in the package Hello World. The test is called Hello World Test. And this is what happened. So this is basically, well, it's similar to what PHPUnit produces. It's a little, the style is a little different. Another example, our very simple hello example. And then I'll show you the DB deploy example. Once again, this is the deploy example. And this is the changelog SQL changelog table. And it then generates the undo file as well. All right, moving on. Say you want to extend Phing. This is very easy. Has anybody ever written a Phing task? 1, 2, 3, 4. Good. Can I ask you what task?
Regards to deployment, I was using XML files, but the problem is the deployment environment, the application is deployed to many servers, many different deployment environments.
Right.
So I created a plugin so config stored in MySQL. and then it loops over the build follow.
Okay, so very specific to your situation. Okay, well that's exactly what Phing was built for. We have numerous extension points in Phing, tasks, types, such as file set, selectors, filters, the mappers, and even loggers. So you can, instead of producing the bright red failure message on your console, you can mail that bright red failure message or put it in HTML. I'll show you how to start or create a simple task. All tasks in Phing extend from the class task. They contain a main method and optionally the init method. Init method is called when Phing starts, and main is called when the actual task starts. And for each attribute that you have in the build file, the halt on failure, for example, with PHPUnit, you create a setter method. That's it, pretty much. Phing does figures, by reflection, figures out which attribute to match to which setter. And then how do you use that? You can use the def task to define the sample task that you want to use in your build file. We give it the name sample, we tell it where to find it, and we tell it which namespace it has. And then in this target, we just call it with the attribute var. We have one setter, set var, and we have one attribute var. You can also create an ad hoc extension. I mentioned before that you can include PHP in your build file. This is not something I recommend for larger tasks, for obvious reasons, but if you have a simple task, this might be worthwhile. Something that you don't want to share between build files, for example. It's pretty much the same deal. You include the task in a CData block, and you just ad hoc it. You give it a name foo, and then you call foo. It's pretty much the same. Future improvements for Phing, and this is where I implore you to contribute to Phing. We, of course, need more tests and support. There's a lot of stuff going on in the PHP world right now, new tools and new methods. Performance is something I would like to increase a lot. As I mentioned before, the FAR package. Phing has a lot of optional dependencies, and a FAR package which includes most of the popular dependencies would be very easy for people to use instead of installing all the dependencies. Our documentation is pretty extensive right now, but it can still be improved. We need more test coverage, we need more unit testing, and we need more IDEs to support Phings. Right now, PHP Storm supports Phing out of the box, but Eclipse, for example, doesn't. And so Zen Studio doesn't. So, pull requests, please. We are on GitHub. Last link, that's our official GitHub link. The rest are some interesting links. Slides will be available later on, SlideShare. Do leave me some feedback on Join In. Find us on phing.info or #Phing on IRC. We are there most of the time. Or of course, @PhingOfficial for the IRC. Thank you so much.